globally, we spend about $1.1 trillion on food waste every single year. So it costs $1.1 trillion. Food waste is a problem. Putting that into context, that would roughly put food waste at the size of the world's 15th largest global economy. But we're a social impact company that uses technology to reduce food waste.
As any marketplace, it's very difficult to get users without stores and stores without users. What's a tactic that can help solve this problem?
What if wasting food became socially unacceptable? Too Good To Go has taken food waste and turned it into a scalable business, generating more than $160 million in annual revenue. At the heart of it is Jamie Crummie, a lawyer turned entrepreneur who made fighting food waste his life's mission by building one of the most recognizable environmentally focused platforms in the world.
Let's build a business which has impact rooted at its core and is using itself as a way to create impact at scale. And that's what we've strived to do with Too Good To Go, which is develop a solution which, to begin with, was quite a disruptive solution. We were disrupting the way in which food businesses operate and engage with surplus food, but creating a model in which everyone was a winner.
Welcome to Reinventing Capitalism, the podcast where I, Claudia Thomas, decode the success of for-profit impact businesses through the stories of their founders. Our goal is to inspire you towards a purpose-driven career, because life's too short for boring jobs and soul-crushing corporations. Hi, can I ask you a quick favor? Every week, we dive into the stories of founders that do more than just make money. Our mission is to prove that a career in impact can be both purposeful and financially sustainable. If you believe in creating meaningful work, share today's episode with one friend who's ready to make a difference. It would mean a great deal to me. Your support is what keeps this show alive and growing. Thank you.
Okay, well, Jamie, thank you so much for having me here in your offices. I love the space. I love how much natural light there is.
Thank you. Yeah, it actually is. I think the claim to fame is it's one of the most sustainable buildings in London, or office buildings in London. So all of the walls, everything is made from reclaimed timber and reclaimed wood. So
I didn't know that.
It's very fitting for us as a brand to be in a building like this.
Yeah, very aligned with your mission.
Certainly. And I hear the coffee's okay as well. So.
Well,
Don't drink coffee, but
I might have a second one, so at least it's okay. So Jamie, you studied law, then moved to entrepreneurship. You are the founder of this amazing company called Too Good To Go, which is currently a multinational company with more than 100 million users, bringing in more than $160 million in annual revenue, which is on a mission to eliminate food waste at a global scale. When was the first time that you questioned capitalism or questioned how things just unfold?
Oh, thank you for the very nice introduction. And look, I wouldn't say it's really around questioning capitalism, but rather it's about questioning the way in which business can be used. And this is deep rooted in circular economy principles, in how can we actually start using business as a source for positive change. And that for me and for my co-founders has been the big motivation behind Too Good To Go, which is, look, let's build a business which has impact rooted at its cause and is using itself as a way to create impact at scale. And that's what we've strived to do with Too Good To Go, which is develop a solution which, to begin with, was quite a disruptive solution. We were disrupting the way in which food businesses operate and engage with surplus food, but creating a model in which everyone was a winner. So we talk about this triple win in which we can go on and articulate how Too Good To Go works, but a model in which the consumer is a winner, right? Through Too Good To Go, you're able to get food at price points which are often more affordable for people. You're able to discover new food, but it's also a win for businesses. Businesses aren't throwing their food away and they're then able to recover sunk costs, but ultimately it's a win for the planet because none of this food is going to waste.
Yeah.
And that for me has been the driving force behind all of this, which is how can we use business as this positive force for good, as this accelerator for change.
Yeah. And did you have, like, how did you decide that food waste was the problem you wanted to solve? Like, was it serendipitous? Is it something that it had come from before?
I don't know if you're familiar with like the term normative determinism.
No, please explain to me what it is.
So normative determinism is this concept where, you know, perhaps it's destiny, perhaps it's something like this, but you end up doing a career, a role which reflects your name. And so my surname is Crummie, you know, crumbs.
Yeah.
Got that a lot as a kid.
Can imagine.
But you end up, I end up working in food as a result of my name, but that's more a bit of tongue in cheek.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting, I guess, reflection for myself, because most people often think, I'm obsessed with food waste because I must have been brought up around food, or my parents were doing farmers or restaurateurs or something like this, and I was surrounded by food, and that isn't necessarily the case. Well, isn't the case, not necessarily. And for myself, I've actually always been someone who's been motivated by social and environmental impact. And for me, that comes from my upbringing. So my parents, they weren't chefs, they weren't farmers, but what they were is, strong advocates for social justice.
Mm-hmm.
And I suppose through that upbringing, through osmosis, lots of these values, lots of these principles have been passed on to myself. So I often say it's social and environmental impact, which has been my motivation, and that stems from my childhood, my upbringing. You mentioned how I studied law, I worked in law, and for me that was all about social justice and environmental justice. I worked in human rights law, indigenous rights, refugee rights, and food waste then became a vehicle to create that impact. And when I started reading up more on the issue of food waste, when I started experiencing it firsthand, it became like such a compelling issue that, why are we not doing more to address food waste at scale?
You mentioned when you started learning about the issue or the problem. Tell us about the problem. So give us some stats about the problem that you're addressing.
I'll try not to bore you with too many stats, because I know it can be slightly overwhelming. But food waste itself, I know I often refer to it as like an apolitical issue. And what I mean by being apolitical is, I think we can all agree food waste is something that we don't enjoy. In the 10 years of Too Good To Go, I've yet to find someone or meet someone who has a smile on their face when they throw food away. It's not something I don't think it's something that gives people a source of joy, but quite the opposite. People have this sense of regret and wish I didn't have to throw that food away. And then when you zoom out a little bit further, you start looking at the big picture of food waste. You quickly realize the scale of the problem. So about 40% of the food that we produce globally ends up being wasted every single year. 40%. That means about 2.5 billion tons of food is wasted on an annual basis. Now, bear in mind, this 2.5 billion tons, this 40%, is a very conservative figure. So actually, it's probably a darn sight more than that. And then the question might be, okay, well, 40% of food is wasted, we get it, nobody enjoys throwing food away, but why is that an issue? And it's an issue because it has huge impacts on our economy, huge ramifications from a social perspective, and importantly, in a context of a climate crisis we're in, it has huge environmental and climate consequences as well. Now, we're in a situation as a global population where everyone is feeling the pinch. There's a cost of living crisis. Inflation in food is skyrocketing. Yet at the same time, globally, we spend about $1.1 trillion on food waste every single year. So it costs $1.1 trillion. Food waste is a problem. Putting that into context, that would roughly put food waste at the size of the world's 15th largest global economy.
It's crazy.
So it's more than the Netherlands and Austria's GDP combined. It is just bonkers when we think of how much food waste is costing us. Similarly, from a social perspective, there are about 370 million people who go to bed hungry every single day. You know, if we look here in the UK, you know, there are thousands and thousands of children who are living in poverty. Yet there is more than enough food being produced to feed everyone. So it's not that I'm saying that food waste is a cause of social deprivation, but rather that it just highlights the injustice of this all. That, you know, we've got enough food, and there are still people who are going to bed hungry. And then this last sort of point, which is around the environmental and climate consequences of food waste. Well, food waste itself is responsible for 10% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions. 10%.
Yeah.
That is 4 to 5 times more than the aviation industry. And I think we'd all kind of be pretty clear to us that, you know, planes, climate, don't really go hand in hand. Similarly, it's over, you know, it's 2 to 3 times more than that of plastic waste.
Yeah.
Again, I think it would be quite clear in sort of public discourse that plastic waste is a big issue. And I'm not trying to say that the aviation and plastics aren't important issues, no, far from it, but rather just to highlight like the scale of food waste as an issue. But there was a big piece of research actually which was done by an organization called Project Jordan. Amazing scientists, and they did a whole host of research back in 2021, I believe it was, and they would do scenario planning. So scenarios looking at what are the solutions that we can do to limit global warming at 1.5 degrees, scenario A, or scenario B, limit global warming by 2100 at 2 degrees. And in this second scenario, what they found was that reducing food waste is the number one action that we as individuals can take to limit the effects of climate change and limit global warming to 2 degrees by 2100. And the reason they had this at the number one action is because it's incredibly simple, it's incredibly effective for us to do at scale. So if you were to contrast that with things like transitioning to a plant-based diet or switching to an electric car,
It's much easier.
it's so much easier. You know, for somebody to stop eating meat, it's involved quite a bit of persuasion, a lot of different habitual changes, and also getting someone to drive an electric car. It needs to be a big like infrastructural change so people can charge their cars, and also the time that it then takes to offset the production of making those cars. So, you know, when we look at this and we take that step out, we know that 40% of food produced globally ends up being wasted. And that from a climate point of view, food waste is responsible for 10% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions. And then the scientists are telling us, the research shows us that reducing food waste is that number one action we can take.
It's a no-brainer.
It becomes a no-brainer. And I guess circling back to that first question, what then got me involved in food waste is like when you start seeing all of this happening and you realize that food waste is such a low-hanging fruit to address like the climate issue. We just need to, I think the first stage is about like educating people, inspiring people about it. But it's then about giving them the tools and making it easy for people to do so. So
you built Too Good To Go to address this problem and to help people reduce food waste in a very easy way. How does Too Good To Go does it?
Yeah, I should probably have started that, shouldn't I? So at Too Good To Go, we're a social impact company, and social impact is, you know, hugely like important to me because that's really at the core of what we're doing. But we're a social impact company that uses technology to reduce food waste, and we do this through a few different tools. But our hero product is the Too Good To Go marketplace, and this essentially is an app that our consumers can download, and upon downloading it, they'll see a whole host of different food businesses that we partner with. Anything from a local bakery through to a high street coffee chain or a local supermarket. And you then pay a reduced price on the app. You don't know exactly what it is you're going to get, but you pay a reduced price for a surprise bag, and then you physically go, you walk, you cycle, you drive to the food business and collect your surprise bag during a collection window, and that might be the end of breakfast, lunch or dinner service.
It can be anything that the shop has to offer?
It really can be anything, and that's the beauty of it. It is a surprise. Now, of course, there are some sort of guidance on it. I mean, if you're rescuing a surprise bag from a sushi shop, you're pretty sure it's going to be sushi and not a slice of pizza, unless it's some sort of fusion that I don't agree with. But there we go. And of course, there are some partners where we can be more specific. So with a retail partner, for example, you might be getting a fruit and veg surprise bag, or you might be getting a dairy bag or a bakery bag. So there are ways that we can be specific, and of course we cater for things like dietary requirements as well.
Why can't you not choose which surplus food to buy?
As a consumer, why you can't?
Yeah, say that it's, I don't know, you have a partnership with Pret, and they have like this surplus food from the day that they're going to throw anyways. Is it the logistics? It takes too much time to post everything and then for the consumer to choose?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And at the heart of what we're doing here at Too Good To Go is to try and create simple solutions for the complex issue of food waste. You know, when we unpack that 40% figure, you start realizing how complex
it is,
our food system is. But in order to make this a simple solution, we've got to make it simple for our consumers to grasp the concept and to be able to use it. But similarly, we want to keep things as simple as possible for our partners. Coupled with this, the reality of food waste is unpredictable. So we don't know exactly what is going to be food waste until it's too late and it is food waste. So in terms of the example used with Pret, a UK-based sort of coffee chain, they'll have a big wide offering from sandwiches to salads to yogurt pots and pastries. As a customer, you kind of know that you're going to be paying £4, whatever it might be, and you'll be getting approximately sort of £12 worth of food, but you don't know specifically what it is. It really just depends on what's left over. And so that is sort of the rationale behind it being a surprise, is it keeps it simple for everybody, but it's also the reality that food waste is unpredictable.
Yeah, it represents what the problem really is. Too Good To Go today, it's a big marketplace.
Yes.
But you first started like knocking doors at small coffee shops. What was an early win that made you realize that you were onto something?
I love these type of questions actually, because it really encourages me to reflect.
To go back in time.
And go back in time, yeah. And you're right, when we started Too Good To Go, myself, my co-founders, it was a business that was very lean. We were bootstrapped. We didn't have any institutional or conventional funding to begin with. It was our own savings, it was grant funding, it was things like this to get us off the ground. And you're very right, we would go round and we would knock on doors and drum up interest. We didn't have sophisticated sales pipelines, we didn't have inbound leads really. We also were a new brand. People didn't know who we were. I slightly touched on this to begin with. We were disruptors. We were introducing a solution where there sort of wasn't really a solution that existed. And you asked, like, what were some of those early examples when it really gave us that confidence and belief that Too Good To Go could scale and become a household name and a global solution. And I'd like to think, we often had, this vision. We always spoke about, Too Good To Go could become a verb. The act of saving food would be a verb itself, or Too Good To Go would be that verb. So we always had these strong aspirations and beliefs that Too Good To Go would go far. And I think quite early on, that confidence and belief in our vision was echoed by some of our partners. Many of them would give us feedback like, I can't believe this solution hasn't been around before. Or like, why is it taking so long for something like this to exist? And that in itself, that validation, becomes a real big sense of belief and investment in ourselves, and it really gives us that confidence to
keep going.
But there's a story as well. I often tell this story to new starters at Too Good To Go. And when we first started speaking to food businesses, often the food businesses we would speak to would be buffet type restaurants. And the rationale behind this is it was quite hard for these businesses to deny having food surplus, and it was quite visual. You have big displays. And so we would speak to various different buffets, and there was a group of buffet chains in the UK. And I remember turning up to a meeting with them, and this was pre us even having the app developed. So it was still just being developed at the time. We had a website, wasn't a particularly fancy website, but we didn't have like amazing an amazing visual identity. Not suggesting our visual identity now is amazing. I love it, but that's for everyone else to come to a conclusion on. Anyway, so I turned up to this meeting with this buffet chain, and didn't have an app to show, but I just had a presentation. Anyway, my laptop wouldn't turn on, and so I had to do this pitch without an app to demo and without any visual cues to show them what it would look like. Anyway, long story short, the buffet chain agrees to sign up to the app, and the rest is history. Look, I'm not the best salesperson by any stretch of imagination, but retrospectively, I asked them, what was it, those months ago, that made you want to sign up to Too Good To Go? And the feedback was, that your vision was so clear, your passion was infectious. And that to me, again, became like this clear sort of proof point that what we had with Too Good To Go is this like special diamond. Yeah. And it's a diamond that we wanted to share with the world, and we want to share it with different partners. Because so many food operators, I'd like to think most food operators, hate to see, their product going up in the bin.
No, for sure. And I mean, that's so true. Passion is contagious. Like, I remember in school, you can love a subject that it's taught by someone without passion, and then you have someone else that it's something that you didn't even know that you would be interested in, but it's taught with so much passion and interest and energy that you're like, I'm sold.
Yes. Yeah. No, I love that reference. I remember some of my school teachers. I've always been a big history fan, or history nut, and it was my teachers that helped
for sure
harness that, for sure.
Quick note before we get back to the episode. Just give me 30 seconds of your time. 2 things. The first is a huge thank you for listening and tuning into the show week after week. It means the world to me. And the second is that we are just getting started. If you enjoy what we do here, please join the 14% of people that listen to this podcast regularly and follow us on this app. I promise to do everything in my power to make this show as good as I can, now and into the future. Thank you.
As any marketplace, it's very difficult to get users without stores and stores without users.
Yes.
So, for any founder listening that might be developing a similar structure, what's a tactic that can help solve this problem?
A tactic,
or something that helped you?
I mean, and each business is unique, right? But for ourselves, we've often been, a partner-led business. It's we're solving a problem of food surplus, or what to do with food surplus for our partners. Similarly, lots of marketplaces, it's really important to grow that supply. So for us, that first priority to begin with was growing the amount of vendors, the amount of food businesses that we had on the platform. Because if we, had a whole load of customers come to the app and there's nothing on it, it doesn't become a very good experience. But of course, the way we did it, if I could go back, I would do things differently. But in so many different ways. But it was hugely important for us to grow the amount of partners that we worked with.
So it was more important to grow the partners first than the users?
Correct,
okay.
Yeah. For that reason of ensuring that when customers downloaded the app, they had a positive experience.
Yeah.
Yet it doesn't always work out as simple as that. Because again, you have businesses which sign up to the platform, and if you don't have any customers, they either forget who you are, they forget they signed up, and then when a customer eventually does go through the door, it's a bit of an awkward exchange and no one really knows what's going on. I mean, going back to the early years, this is sort of 2015, 2016 period. Again, we were very lean operation, super bootstrapped. We're going around and speaking to different food businesses. At this point, we didn't have many people using the marketplace, particularly here in the UK. And then things started to change. Mm-hmm. We ended up getting a journalist, and at this point, this journalist got in touch and said that they would demo the app and write an article for us. And begrudgingly, we paid for the journalist's train ticket.
Okay.
I mean, I think it was only £30-40 train fare from Manchester to Leeds, something like this. So super small, but again, at the time, literally every penny counted, and we needed to make sure that we were investing in the right ways. Anyway, this journalist comes and writes an article about Too Good To Go, tests out the app across a host of different partners that we had in Leeds, and this article was published, and it ends up being shared tens of thousands of times, and it creates this viral moment.
Wow.
And then from there, we ended up getting huge amounts of media coverage. It culminated with us being on the BBC, on the BBC's One Show, which at the time had about 4.5 million people tuning into it. So huge amount of eyeballs on Too Good To Go. And I think after that show was aired, we had something like 30,000 people download the app in the 60 minutes after the show had aired. So it was crazy, huge amounts of interest in the app. But of course, we weren't really prepared for that. So it was then all systems go to try and get as much supply across the UK as possible, because we had people downloading the app as far north as...
Good problem to have, though.
A very good problem to have, sure. But it highlights this issue of being supply constrained. And then at the same time, it then becomes harder to win these customers back, because if they've come on, they've had a poor experience in that first time, it then becomes harder. But look, at that point, you've kind of got your hands tied, and you're a new business. You're wanting to get exposure, but it is this chicken and egg situation, as you say. In retrospect, it would have been brilliant had that come a little bit later when we were a little bit more prepared. Yeah. But we can't complain too much. No, you can't. Definitely.
We were speaking earlier about your main KPI.
Yes.
You've moved from saving 100 million meals to 350 million meals today.
500 million.
500 million meals a day. Tell us about how you track success.
It'd be my pleasure. And for us as a purpose-driven business, it's really important to have a North Star and KPIs which reflect our vision, reflect who we are as a business. So our leading KPI at Too Good To Go is meals saved.
So you finished at quarter end, QBR, you present to whatever, your executives or your employees, and the main KPI that you track, it's meals distributed, meals saved. That's amazing.
And again, the language behind this is super important. We talk about meals being saved and meals being rescued. It's not meals being sold.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the two are probably the same thing, but it's very much about the right mindset,
Yeah.
which is we are guided by our meals saved. And this in it lies is the beauty of Too Good To Go, where our commercial success directly correlates with our environmental impact.
Yeah.
So the more meals that we save, greater our environmental impact is, but it's also the better that the business performance is.
Yeah.
And I think that, going back to your earlier question, is what we've been trying, or what we set out to achieve with Too Good To Go, which is, can we have even more business models which operate like this?
Yeah.
Where you have, a North Star or a social cause, which is deep rooted into your business model.
Yeah. I'm sure with this rapid growth also come a lot of challenges. Do you remember a strategic decision that you had to make that changed the trajectory of the company, and why it was such a difficult call?
I mean, when we look back, the business now we've sort of been around for coming up to 10 years now.
Mm-hmm.
There's been lots of challenging calls which we've had to make. I mean, something that we were speaking off camera before the podcast was about like staying, true to your mission and true to your vision. And in those early days, I mentioned, with getting press coverage, but not necessarily having supply in those areas. Those days of running around the streets, drumming up interest and speaking to various different food businesses and food business owners. It could be quite easy to change our tactics. And what I mean by that is it's been super clear from the outset that we've wanted to develop a brand which is a purpose-driven brand. A brand which is fighting food waste because of the environmental and social implications around it. Creating a brand which is very much centered in doing something positive and something good. And in those early days, it probably could have been easier in the short term to have been a little bit flexible with those principles and maybe led with messaging which was perhaps more price leading.
Mm-hmm.
But the longer term implications of that is you start developing a brand which isn't necessarily true and reflective of what you've set out for.
Mm-hmm.
And it also may impact how others perceive you. And so as a business, particularly in those early years, I think we made that hard decision, because it was the harder decision, but to really stay true to being a purpose-driven business, which true to our core and true to our nature, which is, we're doing this because we want to use business as a source for good. We're
Mm-hmm.
doing this because we're trying to create solutions which, create tools for businesses and for individuals to fight food waste and thus address the climate crisis. So that in itself, I think, is
difficult in itself,
but has paid dividends in the long run, because it's who we are and what it is that we've sort of set out to do.
It's really interesting to see like how you're so passionate about what you do and like how you talk about your business and the problem, which I think that then founding such a mission-driven company blurs the lines between your professional life and your personal life. How do you handle work-life balance?
Yeah, really good question. And again, we were speaking about this before the podcast. I mentioned I've just had a child and I'll be going on parental leave. And the way that is all balanced, I think really changes depending on the trajectory of the business. Now, I think there's probably quite a lot of unhealthy chat that goes on online of the hustle and the grind and whatnot. And to an extent, sometimes that, you have to do that, because if you step away, there isn't anybody else that's going to do the work, right? And someone much wiser and smarter than me, is said, if a business where someone steps away and the house of cards falls down, it's not a very good business.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the beauty of what we've built it Too Good To Go is that anyone from our C-suite team to our more junior employees can take time out from the business, on holiday, recharge, whatever it might be, and the business still keeps operating. We
Yeah.
keep saving meals. So I think it's really important to have a positive work-life balance. I've seen with some of my peers, the challenge of burnout. So it really is important, I think, for all of us to take time to recharge, because taking time out is that recharging, so you can perform at your best for a longer time. So it's as much about being the more sustainable you.
But can you do that from the start? Or is it something that comes later once you've built a company like what Too Good To Go is now?
Yeah, it's a good question. Look, it's easy for me to point back now and with rosy tinted glasses say that it's really easy to put boundaries and guardrails on how you start a business. The fortunate thing for me is, I was starting a business at a time in my life when I had a huge amount of freedom.
Mm-hmm.
I was starting a business when I didn't have a mortgage, I didn't have a family to support, none of these sort of other additional pressures. So I had that, I guess, freedom to fail,
Mm-hmm.
but I also had that luxury where you can probably be a little bit more selfish.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, when I look back at that time, it's still important to be able to carve out time for yourself,
Mm-hmm.
and carve out time to do things outside of work.
Mm-hmm.
But it does become all consuming. I remember every time I would go to the pub, and I'd be walking home from the pub, I would have a load of flyers to hand out to people as I walked
You were
past.
still working on the way home.
Or I'd pop into this cafe or this restaurant and ask what they're doing with their food surplus. Or, if I was on the tube, I'd be speaking to the person to the left and the person to my right. And at some point, you do need to put some more boundaries in. But I also think at that time, as I say, I was young, I had that freedom, and it was exciting.
Mm-hmm.
So it was okay for me.
Yeah, fair enough. You are an advocate of systemic change, but I think we all know that changing behaviors is very hard. Which user behaviors do you track to make sure that people are truly rethinking waste rather than using Too Good To Go just because it's cheaper?
I think there's a few different ways that we can look at changing behaviours. And in the context of Too Good To Go, we talk a lot about changing behaviours to create actually rescuing it Too Good To Go as a habit.
Mm-hmm.
But there are going to be plenty of different motivations for why one person might use Too Good To Go.
Mm-hmm.
And that might be a cost reason, as you point out. You might use it because it's a really fun and innovative way to teach your children about food surplus. Or you might be someone who's using it because you love technology and it's a new app that you found out about. And I don't think that's for us or for me to pass judgment on what that initial motivation is.
Okay.
Where I think there is a role and responsibility for organisations like Too Good To Go is to then start educating people through that journey.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, you might first start using Too Good To Go because it's the app of the day on the App Store and you want to test it out. But actually, when you then start going through this user journey, you start learning more about the amount of money that you've saved through using the app, or you've learned that actually you've learned about the environmental impact or the CO2e equivalents. And so by going on that journey, you then start learning more about the power of reducing food waste.
Mm-hmm.
And through various different touch points with us, you might find out about how to reduce food waste in your home. So it could be tips on tricks on how to use leftovers or how to store your food properly. Or then you might see things like the Too Good To Go date label initiative on the side of your cereal box or top of your cereal box, which reminds you to use your senses to look, smell and taste food once it's gone beyond its best before date. So as I say, I'm not going to pass judgment on what someone's initial motivation is, but I think we play a role in creating a user journey and an ecosystem which then starts giving them more information about food waste, which in turn can help to change habits and attitudes towards food waste on a more general basis.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's a process, and at least with Too Good To Go, you can start
Exactly.
getting into that path of being more aware.
It's it can be the first step on your journey to learning more about food waste, or it might even be someone who's already really far along. It's the beauty of the product, and that's what we're trying to do as well, is to appeal to everyone.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that's, we often talk about this internally. We need everyone reducing food waste badly, rather than a handful of people reducing food waste perfectly.
Yeah.
And it's about doing this at scale. So we now have 100 million customers using Too Good To Go, but it would be brilliant if we could move that to 200, to 300, and then we're really starting to have impact at scale.
Absolutely. Do you are there any other emerging technologies that you're very excited about that you think can contribute to food waste or to tracking surplus waste or surplus food?
I mean, the whole technology space is fascinating, and the development of technology. If we take a step back and I look at from what this food waste space looked like in 2015 to where we are now in 2025, it's materially different. Mm-hmm. We've got smart bins now which are helping commercial kitchens to monitor and track their food waste. We have beers which are made from surplus bread maybe not even a form of technology. We've got solutions like Too Good To Go. So I think it's super fascinating how even this section of food waste is innovating in itself. And if we look at specific technologies, I mean, the buzzword at the moment is AI. And, it's really exciting to see how we've been able to incorporate AI into some of our tech solutions. So in the course of today's discussion, we've predominantly spoken about our marketplace. But what we also have at Too Good To Go are a few other different products. So the app, the marketplace, is our hero product, which I've spoken about, where it connects individuals with businesses. We then have the Too Good To Go parcels, which is where we redistribute food from manufacturers, from food producers, and it's higher value items, higher volume of items, and that is then sent directly to our customers. So that's a direct to consumer offering. And then lastly, we have the Too Good To Go platform, which is a modular solution for many of our partners, particularly in the retail space, but also in other food segments, which essentially allows them to select which modules they want. That could be things like expiry date management, but it could also be AI-powered discounting. And so again, we're seeing here how innovation in technology and the use of AI can really help our partners to improve their reduce to clear processes by having more dynamic price discounting. So an example might be a business could have a blanket rule across all of their retail stores on how they reduce cheese. Yet it doesn't factor in any of the sort of weather patterns that are happening. It doesn't factor in perhaps what the local demographic is looking for. Whereas having something like AI-powered discounting through our tool could allow you to apply a different rule. For example, raclette cheese in the Alpine region in France is going to be a lot more popular, you would assume, than in areas of northern France, particularly during the ski season. So we can have this, AI smart discounting, which then, it really helps our partners to reduce food waste, but also to maximize their return on their products as well.
Super interesting.
Really interesting.
Really interesting. I love the blending of technology with social, environmental impact, like the whole concept of tech for good. I'm just so fascinated by it because it's what can allow these solutions to be scalable, and also what can bring talent to the mix, because it's solutions that can actually have a business model that can actually be sold and therefore be sustainable in the long term.
Yeah. No, definitely. And I think this is really what we've been big advocates for is more businesses and more solutions which are addressing social and environmental challenges.
Absolutely. And this brings me to the last part of the interview, which is how can we inspire talent to transition to the world of impact, or most importantly, just to do more purpose-driven work. What was your inner conviction, I guess, that convinced yourself to swap a more linear career when you were studying your master's in law for entrepreneurship within social impact?
What was the big motivator?
Yeah. I mean, motivator or... Yeah, like internal conviction, and you were like, I'm just gonna take the risk because I trust that this can be it.
We've kind of touched on this throughout the discussion. For me, it's passion. Mm-hmm. It's passion and it's vision, and it's having this clarity of thought that actually this solution really does have the capacity to create impact at the scale that I want it to have. And driven by that passion to see quite immediate results, I think was a big driving force behind all of this for me.
And for someone that is maybe stuck at a corporate job or like working for one of these big companies tied to the company because of the financial stability that it's giving this person, but they want to pivot towards a more purpose-driven career, how would you recommend them to start?
Gosh, I've got to be careful what I say now, so we don't have a whole host of listeners changing career paths. And
that's the goal.
I mean, that isn't. Sorry, what I meant by that was putting themselves in a situation of stress and further financial uncertainty if they've got dependents and things like this. And look, not everybody needs to become an entrepreneur. Mm-hmm. It's also not a career that is for everybody, because it does come with a lot of stress and it comes with a lot of uncertainty. I mentioned earlier how one of the things that I had when I first started was that freedom to fail, because I didn't have I didn't have a family to provide for or to help provide for. I didn't have a mortgage to pay and nothing like this. And I was also doing it at an age where there was probably like no expectation, so it was okay to fail. So I'm speaking about this from a very fortuitous position, and I also echo this sentiment that not everybody needs to be an entrepreneur. But if you are looking for a career change and you are wanting to do something which has purpose, I think you can start by looking within your own organization. Are there ways in which you can try and push your business, your organization, to have and to operate through a more purposeful or purpose-driven lens? So can you do some intrapreneurship, which is trying to, subtly change things from within? I think that's one place to start. If you are wanting to start your own business as well, then that's amazing. But be mindful of how you go about that. There are a whole host of different ways in which you can start. You can start small and do lots of A/B testing, or you can go all in and quit your job and put it all on this idea or this concept that you have to work. Or alternatively, I think it's just start speaking to others who are operating and working in the purpose-driven space. Engage with your network and see where these opportunities lie. Because I am a huge advocate for people transitioning to purpose-driven roles. I think I've said this 1,000 times and I'll continue saying it 1,000 times more. Wouldn't it be amazing if every business had a social or environmental purpose? Then we wouldn't be in a situation where we are, where we're in a climate crisis, but actually businesses are using their influence to address these challenges we face.
And for someone that doesn't have any experience in social impact or climate or any of these impact verticals, they don't want to be an entrepreneur, but they want to work for a company that is purpose driven. Is there anything you recommend for them to do to be noticed by impact, say, founders like you, or to be more recognized by people from the company?
We're always hiring at Too Good To Go, so check out our careers page. Little subtle plug there. I mean, it helps if you know the areas in which you want to operate in. You know, there are countless amazing events which are going on, either digitally or in person. So I always think it's valuable there for people who are starting out and maybe don't have that network, to throw yourself into the deep end and attend some of these events. Lots of them are free to attend. They're often after work, and you can start building your network there. Ask those questions directly to founders or to individuals who are working at businesses which you admire, or which you aspire to work. And then I think outside of that, you can reach out to people on LinkedIn. I think you'd be amazed with how many people are willing to help and are willing to lend an ear.
Yeah,
and particularly if they share those passions with you.
Yeah, I agree. Well, Jamie, it was awesome to be here. It's been awesome to speak to you. I have a tradition, which is the closing question of the podcast, which is what's an overlooked business opportunity that you'd start tomorrow if you weren't doing what you're doing today?
An overlooked business opportunity that I would start tomorrow if I wasn't still doing what I'm doing today. Now, I've got to be careful here, you know, these ideas.
You cannot spill your secrets. It can also be I've had founders approach it from like an actual business perspective and like something that it makes like sense, or a problem that they'd be interested in solving, or more like a passion project where, you know, like they're like, whenever I can mentally leave and stop doing what I'm doing, I will.
Well, I'll tell you what I would do, and it's motivated by my recent life experience. It would be something to do with becoming a new parent. It would, you know, it's just crazy how many nappies and wipes that I go through. So I think there's certainly like some innovation which can happen there. So I mean, we're very fortunate. We've acquired like all of our baby clothes like secondhand, but again, it's bonkers to see the amount of clothes and things which are only needed for 3 months. So I think one area that really needs looking into and addressing is support and guidance particularly for first-time parents, on how to minimize the amount of stuff
that they buy for their babies. Okay, well, food for thought for all the listeners. Again, thank you so much. I love what you're doing. I love the passion with which you're doing what you're doing. And I'm quite confident that we will reach the 1,000 meals distributed sooner than later.
Thank you very much.